as ours. So it's the duty of leadership to constantly come to the population and have this discussion so they can be at par in the way that they feel and in the measures that they intend to take. This is what I'd like to assure you. Our revolution is okay. For anyone who has studied revolutions in the last 100 years, this will come to be one of the fastest revolutions that has been prosecuted with Dane guns and by a people who have suffered almost 100 years of different forms of colonial occupation. We've come thus far, and I can tell you with certain level of certainty that we are doing good. I know those who enjoy chaos, because sometimes chaos gives them the possibility to think they would be seen as the harbinger of stability. That's why they create chaos. They create chaos and project themselves so you can believe, oh, you know, they are the ones who will bring stability. No, they will not bring stability. Any house built on a faulty foundation can only last that long. If there is any one example you have in your hands, it's Cameroon. For more than 60 years, this house was built on a faulty premise, prosecuted with brutality, intoxication through CRTV, manipulation through state-controlled newspapers, and they thought they were going to make us Cameroonians, where we worship their flags, sang their anthems, and behaved to be Roger rather than Te, to be able to have opportunity. And so you're watching a replay of that kind of a movie in this revolution. And if you are smart enough, you have to change the channel. Change the channel and go to the channel of hope and certainty, where there is understanding and clarity. You need clarity, understanding, and certainty to be able to understand where you are and to know how much investment to make. If you don't have that certainty and clarity, you are wasting your time. You will be going around this circle for the next 100 years and you will never be free. So my people, permit me to always come back to you when I find this level of chaos that is being manufactured to give you the impression that our revolution is collapsing. No, some houses are collapsing. The revolution is as strong as it was. And I can tell you with certainty that after having achieved contenderhood at the international system, we will be putting down a program that will give you absolute and unfettered control of the territorial integrity of Ambazonia, and to give you the kind of respect internationally that will give you the recognition you require to be the masters of your own destiny. In the last few days, the Ambazonian Governing Council leadership had some high-level meetings in Washington. The Secretary for International Recognition and the National Security Advisor and a member of the communications team, met some high-level officials in Washington. And as I said the last time, most of these discussions will remain classified, but I can tell you with certainty and clarity that they are ongoing, because we are now a contender, so we don't need to hide when we have these discussions. We are now a contender. We have been seen as a stakeholder in the conflict that is going on, and there will be more opportunities for this international system to have these discussions with us. And it was a high-level discussion, and it went quite well. So the Ambazonian people, you need to know these things. In the next few weeks, the Vice President of the Ambazonian Governing Council, who will be leading the political processes of collaboration and making sure we project authority and recognition, will be holding some high-level meetings also with 3 others within the Foreign Department of the AGC and possibly the Secretariat in one of the European countries. That will be a first of its kind. It will be a working session for 3 days with important stakeholders who also engage in some kind of education to make us understand how you can govern your country when you take it over. And I think, as the Vice President explained in the last outing he made, he's been reaching out to other high-level stakeholders in our revolution. And in the next few weeks, I've been briefed. They will be meeting together somewhere out here in Europe to have some concrete discussions. I think those stakeholders have been briefed, and continuous information will be provided to them so all of them can have this meeting to project the Ambazonian people as a solidified foundation upon which the international community can lay its trust. This is what you should know. As I said, I don't say things just to please. I don't say things because they are necessary for you to like me. You must not like me, but at least you should understand me. So I say things when I am sure that the necessary homework has been done and I have reached a certain level of understanding that it is time to communicate a certain level of information to the Ambazonian people. It is not an AGC information, it's not an AYABA information, it's an Ambazonian information. And as I promised you before, we will walk this journey together. Everyone, the good, the bad, the ugly, those you like and those you don't like. And we should be able to reach Boya as a people. That would be the most beautiful thing, the most beautiful gift we can ever offer our country. And I work hard, so hard to make sure this promise is kept. And I am really grateful to the leadership of Dr. Nyi, the Vice President of the Ambazonian Governing Council, Dr. DR.AYABA, FINDEP and COMDEP and the others for making sure these things are done following the charter of the Ambazonian Governing Council and making sure we can tap from other revolutions and understand why chaos doesn't help us, it only helps the enemy. Let me also talk about contenderhood in Ground Zero. This is what you should know. It is subject to different levels of interpretation. But I'm going to present certain facts and I'm going to do some subjective analysis and hope it's those subjective, but you can appreciate it from an objective perspective. What we know is that on the ground, Ambazonia now controls about 80% of the Ambazonian territory. I am not talking about physical control. I am talking about where we have psychological and strategic control. It's 80% of our territory. La République du Cameroon has been relegated to big cities. They have evacuated most villages, most districts, and they are now hiding sometimes in those places in barracks and can only go out when we are not sure. So you now control about 80% of the Ambazonian territory. And lest you forget, this is the result of the block by block approach, where a bottom-up approach of resistance make sure you spread the enemy wide and thin and you hand control to the neighborhoods, to all those who live in that area and who can decide the destiny of that neighborhood and that block and make sure, you can make it ungovernable, you can increase the cost of the occupation. So you now control 80%. And I think I had a discussion with Comrade Bo the other day. He gave me these facts, and these are irrefutable facts. You now control 80% of your homeland. But this is the most interesting fact. You have authority. Listen carefully. You have authority and power over 95% of Ambazonia. That means you can successfully impose ghost towns over 95% of our territory. You can successfully impose lockdown over 95% of our territory. So if you combine 80% control, 95% projection of authority, we can conclude with certainty that La République is defeated in Ambazonia. Yes, 80% control, 90% projection of authority and power gives you the right to tell the international system that La République has been defeated in the homeland. Now, you may conceive of a revolution for liberation and restoration as an act where you will have to take over the entire territory of Ambazonia to be able to have independence. No. You can control just one state effectively and still have independence. The occupier can have control over 95% physical control of your territory and you control just 10%. But once you are able to impose ungovernability, make sure the occupation is prosecuted at a higher cost, you can claim effectively ownership of your land and call on the international system to accord recognition of that state. So it is very important we understand this logic, because we can factor this in strategic thinking, in the way we formulate policies, and in the way we prosecute the revolution on the ground. This is very important for the soldiers. So the soldiers have to understand, you don't need to physically hold territory to be able to be independent. But you can effectively have psychological control over territory, impose your rule over that territory, and gain independence. This is why the formulation of strategies in a revolution must be based on in-depth understanding on the objective you want to attain, the strategy you want to implement, and the nature of the beast you are dealing with, and most importantly, a detailed understanding of international law and how the international system functions. Ambazonians, freedom begins from here. If you believe you are a people, if you believe you are free, stop fighting one another. Put a big smile on your face. Claim Ambazonia in your heart. And the rest will be done for you. That's why we are winning. Because leadership understands the stakes of the game. Leadership understands what it will take to defeat the enemy. Leadership understands what the international system, how it operates. And we know, we believe in the Ambazonian people's ability to survive any form of occupation. Now, in the coming weeks and months, there may arise the necessity for us to move our capital from Buea. I am not going to go into the details, but I would like you to start having this in the back of your mind. There may arise the necessity to temporarily move our capital from Buea to a new location where we can exercise effective both physical and psychological control. That will translate into some policy formulations and articulations that you will understand in the months ahead. So whenever this decision is made, I will give proper explanation to the Ambazonian people why this decision has been made. But make no mistake, our capital will remain Buea. But sometimes in a revolution, there is the strategic necessity to move the capital to a location that is defensible, it is perceived as free, and where the seat of any government you decide to form might take root. So that is a possibility going forward. Now, what are the implications of these analyses that I'm making? I want to prepare your mind for something, and I'm preparing the international system to understand that we are not just some rogues holding den guns and running around sticking our den guns in the lives of the occupier, but that we understand exactly what we are doing, where we are headed to, and exactly the kind of land that we intend to have. The necessity for the international system to recognize Ambazonia is very, very important. It's critical. They are having all of these discussions in the UN Security Council. They are having these discussions in the House of the Senate, in the House of Lords, in the Bundestag and other institutions. The United Nations Humanitarian Authority produced data in the past few weeks that said the conflicts affecting 4 million Ambazonians, with 1.5 million absolutely needing humanitarian aid. More than 460,000, I think Baramak put it to 500, internally displaced persons. The number of refugees moving into Nigeria is also increasing. The level of impunity by Cameroon has reached the level of satanic understanding, where more than 500 villages have been razed down, thousands of houses burnt, schools are shut down, economic activities have come to a halt. Now, This is why they need to recognize Ambazonia. You see, no matter the amount of money you give Aya Foundation, it cannot take care of more than 500,000 IDPs. It cannot reconstruct more than 500 houses that have been burnt. It cannot rebuild the system. No matter the amount of money the United Nations is going to put in, it is not going to solve the humanitarian crisis. Fellow Ambazonians, they know it. You know it. I know it. The only institution that will be able to solve the humanitarian and political crisis is an Ambazonian government. An Ambazonian government duly installed in our capital, or in a safe capital that we might create. If they recognize Ambazonia, they give us access to international institutions, credit institutions, humanitarian institutions, and we become the sole instrument of policy implementation. This is what I mean. At this stage of our revolution, Cameroon remains the sole instrument of policy implementation. It means humanitarian activities within Ambazonia has to still necessitate the permission of Cameroon. But Cameroon understands that if you provide that access, you strengthen the fighting capabilities, you strengthen the defensive capabilities of the Ambazonian people. So the reason why some countries refuse humanitarian aid, it is because they want to use its avoidance or its absence to impose some cost on the resistance. That is why they need to recognize Ambazonia as a free country, because, as I said, you control 80%, you have political authority over 95%. So they need to recognize us so we can have access to making those decisions that can remove the IDPs from the bushes, start rebuilding homes and resettling our people, bringing back the refugees from Nigeria, opening our schools so that a generation is not lost out of education, and developing policies to integrate ourselves within the West African Economic Community. Don't forget, the Gulf of Guinea is the highest route of trade within that particular region. Any instability within Ambazonia is going to affect international trade. It's going to affect international peace and security, because it's a volatile region surrounded by, you find the rebels in eastern Nigeria, you find Boko Haram in the north, and instability in Ambazonia is going to have great repercussions in terms of prices of oil, in terms of international mobility of people that is going to affect security of nations, is going to dislocate communities in other countries, is going to affect, the way that they generate policies within their own country. So the necessity based on these realities that I have given for the international system to recognize Ambazonia is right now, and the Vice President and his team and other international stakeholders are making sure in these discussions that we are having that it's time to recognize Ambazonia if you want to stop the chaos and the madness from Yaoundé. My fellow people, now, what puzzles me is that if you look at these facts, I'm not talking about constructed facts. I'm not talking about political facts. I'm not talking about AYABA facts, AGC facts. I'm talking about objective facts. If you look at them, Cameroon has lost control over Ambazonia. That's a fact. If you say ghost town, it takes place 90% in Ambazonia. Immutable fact. If you want to shut down Bamenda tomorrow, you shut it down 95%. That's a fact. Do you still know we have Ambazonians? You call them federalists. I call them enablers. collaborators. They are still batting for Cameroon. They are still going around the world trying to convince us to be slaves in the land of our birth, in the land of Kuva Likenye, of the generalivos, in the land of the big numbers. They are still going around, batting for the occupier, hoping to God Almighty that you will be so sick and tired of fighting, so gullible, that they will convince you to be slaves. Let me remind you, on the 22nd of January 1961, the Prime Minister of Nigeria, Tafawa Balewa, this is what he said. If you vote to join Cameroon, I cannot see how you can avoid living a life of poverty and hardship and under the constant shadow of violence which the government cannot control. This is what Ndele told you. I want the enablers and the collaborators to listen carefully. Those who want you to stake your future in the house of chaos, in the house where you're raped, where your resources are exploited with impunity to build a large army to keep you as a slave in the land of your birth. I can tell you, if all of you decide to be with Cameroon, I will occupy Ambazonia alone. I will occupy it alone and you can move over across. But listen to what Ndele said. If you vote for Cameroon Republic, you will invite a new system under which everyone lives in fear of the police and the army. You will not be free to move about. You cannot lecture freely or discuss your political views in public. And you can be arrested and flogged by the police and even imprisoned without a fair trial. Pa Tasang should be listening to this. Benji, Nelson, Cedric, Rene. They're surely listening to this. Ndango is listening. Numvi is listening to this.